we ready? Sort of. Oh, now we're adjusting. Okay. I suppose I should figure out which questions I'm asking here.
Might be important.
Yeah, maybe. Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is Todd, and with me, as always, is Parson Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Good to see you.
How you doing?
Doing well, man. How about you?
I'm doing okay.
All right.
So we're around the dinner table for our final course
Last one.
of this series.
Yep.
And after this, you're never going to preach again.
Oh,
right?
no, that's not true.
Oh, okay,
No.
fine. All right. Next week, we're going to start Advent.
In the season.
Yes. Last topic for this series. It's a big one, just like, well, they've all been big ones, but mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
Multiple texts again throughout the series, throughout the sermon, I should say. Your big idea: mental and emotional health are the result of learning how to work through real life in faithful, functional, and formative ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. You started, before I get to your points, you started out and you touched on like clinical assistance,
Mm-hmm.
right? You didn't really make the whole sermon about that.
No, it really was more of a disclaimer.
Kind of a disclaimer,
Yeah.
right? But I wanted to touch on that just because you could probably touch on this for a variety of these topics. Not just Christians, but a variety of people can approach something with kind of a, I don't struggle with, therefore it doesn't exist
Mm-hmm.
attitude,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus there are people that say, hey, maybe I live the life that I live. I have my strengths and weaknesses. These are kind of the things that I grapple with. And I don't struggle with whatever, but I recognize it's there. I respect it's there. I'm not going to make assumptions.
Sure.
What do you say to the person, or how do you give someone kind of a reoriented sense of the world when they do sort of dismiss, when they sort of say, well, particularly mental emotional health, people need to just blank, right?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. Well, I mean, I think two things about it. One, get as much, out of your system as possible and just be honest. First off, everybody has mental and emotional health problems. Everybody. There's not a soul alive living in the world that doesn't. There's a big difference between discussions around how to appropriately kind of delve into the world of practicing or practices and behaviors for the sake of mental emotional health, and then mental and emotional disease, right? These are very different things. You have clinical issues that require significant and varied types of help, and those are a good thing, and people should pursue those with all their heart. And then you have people who have not been given sort of basic tools, who just kind of exist as unhealthy people, right? It's almost like the difference between the person who has to go in for the quadruple bypass and the person who's just sitting on the couch eating chips all day, right? Both of them are unhealthy. One of them is clinically so, the other is maybe just not yet. And so that's kind of what I always want to say to people is when someone says, oh, I don't need therapy, or I don't need this, or this sermon doesn't really apply to me, or this topic doesn't really live in my world, I just want to call them out on that immediately, because that's just not true. Absolutely every person is in there some way, somehow. And if they don't have good behaviors in place, then they are heading to some place that's ultimately damaging and awful.
Okay. So in your first point, you were talking about, let me back up and say you talked about a paradigm, but also a cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
A paradigm meaning a structure to sort of look at the way we sort of live and address mental and emotional health, but also a cycle in that it sort of goes around. It's not just a linear progression. So you talked about orientation, disorientation, reorientation.
Yeah.
Right? And we could probably apply that construct to a variety of different things in life.
Sure.
Spiritually, practically, that sort of thing. So your first point, orientation, learn to be happy when things are harmonious.
Yeah.
Right? So let me ask you a couple of questions about that. First of all, how do we differentiate between, because when you say happy, right? So you go to anybody, I could say, Jordan, are you happy today?
Right.
Right? Are you experiencing happiness in your life? There's sort of the pragmatic, earthly, kind of human happy, right? It's a nice day. I'm healthy. I have a job. I have people that seem to put up with me, that sort of thing.
Sure.
There's the spiritual happy. Despite the fact that I'm a sinner and I deserve nothing, I am saved by grace. That should be a source of overwhelming and constant happiness.
Right.
So when you talk about learn to be happy when things are harmonious, spiritually things kind of always are harmonious if you look at it big picture, even though we don't always feel it.
Yeah.
So how do we differentiate in our own life between sort of spiritual happy and just kind of get up in the morning and do our life happy?
Yeah, I would actually probably push back a little bit and say that it's maybe even a little bit harmful to compartmentalize those two worlds. Truth be told, scriptures are pretty clear. Sun shines, rain pours on the righteous and the wicked alike, right? So grace, things worth being happy over, the harmonious stuff, it's happening in general. Now, the spiritual person, or the person full of the Spirit, given grace by the Lord Jesus in a unique way, their happiness, I would say, is maybe magnified. It's not, though, that there's a different type of happiness per se than anyone else's experience. It's just a more clear, full, and satisfying happiness. So, as you said, if you wake up in the morning, it's a sunny day, you don't know Jesus, you roll out of bed, sure, you can absolutely be happy. This is God's goodness to you. You have a beautiful, bright, warm, sunny day to enjoy, right? However, that happiness is magnified when the Christian's blind eyes are opened and they know that this is not just a fluke incident where clouds happen to depart, but this is actually God doing something wonderful for his kid, right? So your happiness is magnified. All human beings should show some semblance of happiness. So it's not so much whether or not the Christian should be more happy. I think we naturally will be, or maybe supernaturally will be, but it's whether or not we know how to process happiness or reasons to be happy in general. There are people that roll out of bed knowing Jesus or not knowing Jesus, and the sun is shining, and they don't know how to be happy about that. They don't know how to slow down and enjoy the fact that something really, really fantastic is happening, and they get the grace in the moment to be alive and well and to experience it. And that is what I think is ultimately problematic. That's what leads to instability and unhealth, both mentally and emotionally. When you don't know how, or you're not making any efforts to learn how to be happy when the Lord says, here are good, wonderful, and happy things. Does that make sense?
It does, but let me redirect it a little bit. We still kind of, and I understand what you're saying about, being careful about compartmentalize or differentiate. We still kind of process how we're doing, how we're feeling based on what's going on in our sort of life circumstances, as it were, right? Mm-hmm. So are we talking about then kind of choosing to be happy sometimes, even if we're not necessarily feeling it, particularly when we are going through some of these earthly trials, which we'll talk about in a second?
Yeah, I would say that gets closer to the head of the needle. I think it's both a choice, but I think it's also like a learning curve, right? It's not just something you say, oh, I don't feel happy, I'm just going to snap out of it, because that's not real either, right? It is about a process of learning. Like if for all intents and purposes, looking around me, there are reasons to be happy and I'm not feeling happy, it's starting to ask big questions, self-evaluate, as I said on Sunday. Be prayerful in the sense of, and someone actually called me out on this after the sermon, and I'm kind of glad they did. I was not saying then, nor am I saying now, that you just sort of pray the gloom away, right? It doesn't work like that. But we do believe in a God who is alive and well and interacting in our lives regularly. So don't remove prayerfulness as a part of your life, right? If you're not feeling happy and you know there are good reasons to be, start on your knees, get before Jesus and plead with him that he might give you good reasons to be filled with joy. Second, surround yourself with people who have learned this process. They learn how to work through these happy experiences in their life and learn from them, glean from them, understand what it might mean, and maybe even have them encourage and help you. And then lastly, continually let the scriptures narrate a new story for you. What I mean by that is, as David said in Psalm 16, you are forever with me. You carry me by my right hand. You're never going to leave nor forsake me. He doesn't know how to do this. He's not feeling comfortable with this kind of juncture of his life, but he's confident in the one that walks with him will lead him to do and to experience things that may be even difficult for him, but ultimately will be good. So he trusts him and he wanders off with him into that. I think that as kind of a three-pronged approach, I think that could help a lot of us, in the very least, just begin to venture out into those waters and learn something that maybe we've given up hope in for quite some time.
So that kind of leads into your second point, because again, the next sort of piece of the paradigm or the cycle is disorientation.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to be honest when things are hellish.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I won't re-ask the question from a sort of earthly spiritual standpoint, right? There is the earthly of jobs and family and friends and health and lots of stuff that makes us feel, oh man, my life just isn't very fun right now because I've got all these distractions. But there is also, again, some of the stuff you talked about, King David, feeling like God is distant, feeling like God is not answering certain prayers, feeling like we're being you're being attacked by, whether again it's earthly or sort of spiritual foes, and God is not there to sort of ward off all the defenses.
Yeah.
How do we as a community, because we sometimes can kind of emphasize the happy part, right? Particularly in our gatherings.
Oh yeah.
Sunday mornings, welcome to worship. Great to see you. How you doing?
Yeah,
right?
We don't do lament well.
Turn to your neighbor, pass the peace.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Right? How do we do that as a community? Knowing that if we're honest, right? There's days where I may get up in the morning or whatever's going on in my life, and maybe I get to worship. Maybe I do gather with the saints. I'm just not feeling this happiness, right? I can maybe cognitively recognize, oh, I should be, but for a variety of reasons, I'm just not. Okay. How do we create that space? You said we don't lament well.
Yeah.
And we don't always welcome that either.
Right.
If I say to you, hey, how you doing? I'm going to expect a sort of generic, good, not too bad, can't complain, how are you type of thing.
Yeah.
If you said, well, since you asked, I'm really having a terrible day.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you about it. How do we create that space to allow people to do that?
That's a really tough question to answer. And frankly, it's like the golden goose, right? Because there are so many people and so much plastic behavior that both happens in the kind of corporate gathering of the church, but it happens outside of there too. Christians we just don't know how to, like I said, we don't know how to lament. And we also don't know how to handle people that are lamenting, right? You have a party, we all want to go. You call me up and say, man, I am struggling. I might do it out of love for you, but it's rough, right? I don't want to be a part of that. Not a lot of people want to put themselves in positions where they're kind of feeling the wake of your own sadness or suffering. You want to be around wonderful, positive things as much as possible. So you just have to, it really does require people to recognize that our duty to one another is to create not just safe places for that to happen, but also to encourage it. Maybe the part that's not being talked about nearly as much is, why is it that Christians don't encourage lamentation? Why is it that we don't hear the stories of our brothers and sisters and say, dude, you know what you need to do today? You need to get kind of secluded and you just need to scream. Like, you need to cry. You need to have some time, and you need to maybe journal out these really, really awful situations. And you need to start asking God and asking other people, why? Like, why is this happening? And why is this happening to you? A major disconnect with our humanity is pretending that it's not okay to be not okay. And that's just a sad, sad reality. And so much within the church, or so many within the church, we just have no concept for that. And so we don't even know how to create safe harbor for people. So the answer to that question, ultimately, I don't know. What I do know on a more personal level is that we need to do, as my buddy, as I stated on Sunday, and you're one of these people too, but as my buddy Jim Tanis has been for me many times, is I'll go to his house and I'll kind of, or I'll reach out to him on the phone or whatever, and I'll sort of just begin upheaving all the stuff going on in my life. And he just gives me a place to do that. He doesn't expect me to fix it. He doesn't try to gloss over it. He's not one of those guys that says, oh, but God is going to take care of it. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He, like many other men in my life, they just come alongside me and say, it's terrible. This is a really, really awful season. And you just got to live in it. And we got to live in it together. You know what I mean?
I do.
So the more I think we do that, I think the more authentic it becomes for people who are trying to figure out how to suffer well and for the right amount of time, that they can do it safely and being kind of surrounded by people that will hedge in and protect them.
Well, and this is just, I won't ask you a follow-up question on this, but this is just an observation, because you talked about it earlier. Surround yourself with happy people, positive people, encouraging people, but you also said surround yourself with people that you can just share with, that you can be authentic with. It's complicated to sort of say, okay, is that the same party? Are we laughing and crying at the same gathering type of thing? I mean, and to your point, it's interesting and kind of a perplexing challenge for the church to create a space where you kind of hit all of those things at the same time, particularly in a corporate setting,
right?
Where you say, okay, do I want people to, how do I create an environment where people feel safe amongst 150 strangers to either just shout for joy or just burst into uncontrollable tears, right, at the same time? That's a really high and low emotional wave in a lot of ways.
And sadly, and I'm so glad you said it, because right up against that, the church needs to hear that both of those are equally holy and sacred, right?
Sure.
You didn't nail it spiritually when everybody leaves on a high note any more than if everyone leaves in tears with their arms around each other.
Right.
Both of those things are the most deep and meaningful and, in some respects, human experiences we get to have with God.
Right.
And so we want to encourage that. We want to support that. And we want to, like you said, create safe spaces for more of that to happen.
And I think sometimes when I've looked historically at my participation in corporate worship and that sort of thing, as you said, we don't lament well, and we actually don't welcome it sometimes.
Yeah.
I've actually had people say to me, if I don't have a chipper look on my face on a Sunday morning, they'll say, smile.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insulting, first of all, and it's insensitive.
Sure.
Because there are people that are walking in there looking for sanctuary.
Yeah.
Truly. They're walking into the sanctuary looking for sanctuary because their life is falling apart.
Right.
They don't know where else to go, and this is where they appeared. So if someone just says to them, oh, well, just put a smile on your face, that'll fix everything.
Yeah.
They might just walk out the doors and never come back again.
And you're going to help them become far more mentally and emotionally unstable and unbalanced and unhealthy.
For sure.
Yeah.
So your last point, reorientation. Learn to be hopeful when help arrives. And I want to sort of redirect it a little bit back to the hellish piece, because help comes in a variety of different ways, right? It can come through, as you talked about, other brothers and sisters. It comes through just dropping to our knees and praying.
Yeah.
Right? So what is the prayer, particularly when people don't necessarily feel a sense of hope? Because we talk about like the Apostle Paul, right? And again, historically, we don't know for sure what Paul struggled with, but he struggled with something. There was some sort of thorn in his flesh that he mentions, right? Our tendency is to say, this part of my life is making me sad. I'm going to pray that it stops or is removed or turns to happy so that I can be happy.
Yeah.
The reality is that God uses these things. And we talked about this on a prior episode. I don't remember exactly which one we were talking about, but the sort of counterintuitive idea of if you're going through a trial, we don't tend to celebrate that.
Yeah.
We don't say, hey, I got a awful medical diagnosis. Isn't that fantastic? I'm going to learn so much from God through this. So excited.
Yeah.
Not the way we think.
No.
So what is the prayer? You're going through some stuff. You're not, feeling awesome, right? You know this. What do you ask for? Are you asking for God to take things away? Or are you asking for God to just do what God is going to do, knowing that God may not remove that?
Yeah.
He may continue to sort of live out the, not giving you what you can't bear, type of thing.
Your language was getting like right into the valley of it all when you said God doing what God will do. Hopelessness isn't necessarily that you know what the outcome should be, that you know the amount of time you should be in either a season of happiness or a season of kind of trepidation, right? Like hopefulness doesn't have anything to do with evidence of anything. Hopefulness is surrounded around ultimate outcomes. There is a desire you pine for, right? Whatever that might be. And you need help in any of these scenarios, right? And so the hope is, like we said before, if I'm not happy, but there's every good reason to be happy, the hope is that Christ will arrive as a present help in time of need, that he will be a good shepherding friend to someone like me, and that he will give me reasons when I can't come up with them on my own to begin to engage this happy, harmonious season. Likewise, you go to Psalm 13 and you're screaming and crying, how dare you? How could you leave me? How could you abandon me? A hopeful person says, I know this is good to get this out. I also know that it's not good to live here forever. I don't know how long I need to be here. I don't know how my edges need to be rounded off and I need to be molded or shaped during this time. But I'm hopeful that God will show up and accomplish that good and great work in me. Psalm 73, which is my last text in the sermon for that point, Asaph writes, when speaking of his own experience, he said, when I got this way, when I got hard and calloused and kind of immovable, I would maybe use apathetic, right? When I got this way, I was brutish and like a beast towards you, right? Like there was nothing in me that desired you. There's nothing in me that desired your present help in my life. I had no hope for you to come. I had no hope for you to do anything great. I had no hope for the outcome, nothing. I had nothing in me. And that was the most problematic moment for him. And he said that in light of that, he watched you, or you being Jesus, he watched Jesus come in anyways. And he watched Jesus come in and do this remarkable, helpful thing in his life. And that completely softened him and completely shaped him and ultimately made him someone that could write this absolutely amazing final stanza, which was, who have I in heaven beside you? On earth, there's nothing I desire beside you. My heart, my flesh, maybe better stated, my life, everything may fail me, will fail me, but the Lord is my strength and my portion forever. You don't say that even when you're happy all the time. You definitely don't always say that when you're sad, but you do say that in happy and sad times when you've come to know the Lord to be a present help in any and every time of need, to provide all the things that we ultimately need and desire as people who are following after him. So that's the prayer. Lord, make me hopeful like Asaph is hopeful. Right? I don't know how to be. I can't manufacture these things on my own. But regardless of what situation I'm in and what feelings I'm overwhelmed with, right? Make me hopeful that you will apply these things to my good in every sense of the word. That's the prayer. It's not take me out of the sadness. It's not take me out of the happiness. It's not find some random bland place for me to exist. Keep me here as long as I must be kept here, so that ultimately what is good and wonderful for me, for my friends, for my church, my community, my family, right? Keep me here and let me flourish in this space as much as possible. That's the prayer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks again for joining us on Sermon Rewind. Just a reminder, we're here on Sunday mornings, 10 a.m., and we invite you, if you're in the area, to join us as we look forward to a season of anticipation as we dig into Advent. It's a glorious time of year, and Pastor Jordan will be leading us. Thanks again for joining us on Sermon Rewind.
See you soon.